a virtual event aimed at learning about the best practices from abroad, exchanging experiences and ideas. My name is Živile Kropaitė. I will be your moderator for the next 2 hours. That's how long we will spend together. I want to remind everybody that this event is organized by the team of the project Strengthening Capacities in Results-Oriented Management of the Office of the Government of Lithuania. Just a few housekeeping rules for everybody. Questions can be asked both live and in the chat. I will remind you where it's appropriate or where we would expect your questions, so please be active. You can do it both in Lithuanian and English. We will try our best with interpreting. The topic is long-term strategies. We will mainly focus on practical implementation issues. The main sort of task of the discussion is to debate practical issues of the governance and implementation of national long-term strategy. Just a bit of a Lithuanian context at the moment, at the present time. Lithuania is on its way of finalizing preparation of strategy Lithuania 2050, state progress strategy. And Lithuania has also recently started the implementation of the national progress plan that also has to be adjusted to the vision and ambitions of Lithuania 2050. So this is just a bit of a context. The event is being recorded, so that's just a friendly reminder. Welcome everybody again. I see that more of you are joining, so welcome. Let's have a fruitful 2 hours. And let's start with national long-term strategies in Lithuania, how to ensure effective framework for their empowerment. This will be presented by our first speaker, Head of Strategic Governance Group at the Office of the Government at the Republic of Lithuania, Ms. Daiva Žaromskytė. Daiva is with us. Thank you for joining, and we give the floor to you.
Okay, good morning again for everyone. I'll try to manage my slides. Do you see them in correct mode?
I think we do. We can.
Okay, good, nice. Okay, so usually as Živile presented, I, from Government Office of the Republic of Lithuania, Head of Strategic Governance Group, usually I talk very fast, but today I have a personal issue, you know, to talk a little bit slower, because when I'm talking very fast, I just forgot to say the things I wish to share with the audience. So probably because I'm speaking the first one, the main aim is to present a little bit the context of strategic governance system we have in Lithuania, to stand for everybody on the same page, that the discussion we will have after presentations would be fruitful and constructive. So main topics of my presentation probably will be to present you the framework of strategic governance system, and how at the moment we are dealing with implementation, what linkages, what provisions are foreseen in our legal basis, and of course talk a little bit about the lessons we learned from the future periods, and some, I don't know, issues we would like to avoid in the next period. We're talking about the Lithuania progress strategy. Are my slides changing? Is it everything okay? Just, I don't know. Good.
Yes, everything is fine.
Thank you. Here you see the picture as we could show and illustrate our framework of strategic governance system in Lithuania. In original basis, the picture is a little bit more sophisticated than this one, but we just try to lighten it to be more understandable during this very short period we have for this event. And as you see, we have in the picture, we have several levels in our strategic governance system. It's state strategies at the top of the system, strategic level, programming level, and then activity level linked with the budgeting. Here you see the main documents we operate in our strategic governance system. So probably at the top level, it's the most interesting at today's discussion, and we will focus on it. But in the strategic level also, it's very important, national development plan. It's the same. It depends who talks about it. It can be called national development plan or national progress plan. Just be sure that it's the same document. Also, what documents are implementing our national development plan. Of course, political documents are also very important, and they stand near all our strategies all the time. And of course, the budgeting level is also very important and interesting also. But I think that if there will be questions, of course, we would cover them, but it's not the topic of today's discussions. So talking about the long-term strategies in Lithuania, I will go a little bit through all of the main levels we deal with. So we have 3 of them at the moment: state progress strategy, national security strategy, and concept of special plan of the Republic of Lithuania. So as we count and think about the state progress strategy in Lithuania, it's a vision document, how we would like to see the state, at what point we would like to be at a specific time. And this document is prepared by government office, prime minister office, or government office. It's the same, together with government strategic analysis and a future committee of the parliament and Vilnius University, of course, in collaboration with our line ministers and society. Next presentation from Lithuanian side, a colleague from the Vilnius University, Erika, will present, I think, how we developed Lithuania 2050, as Živilė mentioned. So I will not stop at this. And what's also important to say that long-term strategies in Lithuania are all approved by the parliament. It's the mandate of our parliament, adopted by parliament before they are approved in government sitting. Another document is national security strategy. Of course, it's national security document, the most important one, and it's the document prepared by National Defense Ministry and also adopted by Parliament. And the concept of special plan of the Republic of Lithuania, the owner of this document, as I could say this, is Ministry of Environment, and also it's adopted by Parliament, and it's also a very important document in the strategic governance system that it sets directions and functional priorities for the use of our state territory, and probably all other strategic documents should be in compliance with this concept of special plan of the Republic of Lithuania. And in some cases, it even determines the investments we plan in one or other area of the state territory. A little bit more about state progress strategies, just the photo of provisions we have in our regulation. So it's quite long document, duration more than 20 years. And as I mentioned, the harmony with other strategies should be also taken into account. And here in my left, in your right, probably you see the main elements of this document, what must be developed in state progress strategy. We have the vision, we have specific directions for the state's development. Of course, we are talking about intended results and looking and developing specific impact indicators to try to measure how we succeed with the directions are developed for implementation for the vision of the states. And of course, the regular part probably in all strategies is some kind of provisions of implementation, how we will be implement, how we will be evaluate, report, or change the things if we will see that things are not happen in practice as we planned in the beginning. So because Erica will present you and elaborate probably a lot on LT 2050, how we went through the process and what are the main key things in the document. Document was approved by the government last week, and now we have already submitted it to the parliament. We believe that, and we very hope so, that in early autumn, the discussions in parliament will be over and the document will be adopted. And then probably we in Lithuania will face the situation at the moment. We should start really dealing with the all implementation phase. So just to imagine what was in the LT 2030 document. So what the directions were developed for the state progress. We were talking about the smart society, we were talking about the smart economy and smart governance. Of course, the strategy had some descriptive part where we presented our thinking, what smart society is, smart economy or smart governance is, how we would like look at 2030. Of course, the strategy has the part of indicators, and looking from the nowadays perspective, when we can compare how Lithuania 2030 looked and how looks Lithuania 2050, probably we could say that Lithuania 2030 was a common strategic document with all common elements in it. And it can be that it was a little bit difficult or even too bureaucratic to become really vision document to be implemented through all other strategic documents. The next level, when we are going down from the top, is National Development Plan. Here also you see the main elements, what must be developed in this document. And probably it's what I would like to stress and to focus when we're talking about the National Development Plan in the context of state progress strategy, that probably it should be the main strategic document which is dedicated to implement state progress strategy. Of course, if state progress strategy is not required additional allocations, it can be that we can seek progress of the state to going to the vision point of the state without budgets with line ministries. But if we are talking about the additional allocations, so National Development Plan becomes the main document where these development objectives should be planned. Talking about the owner of the document, so it's collaboration between government office and line ministries. Development plan is adopted by government, but probably it's important to say that we changed a little bit regulation between 2020 when we introduced our new strategic governance system, because we had a reform in in 2020-21. And we changed a little bit regulation in the end of 2022, because we had a quite good discussion with the parliament members in the context that Parliament is responsible for setting strategic goals of the progress of the state, and if National Development Plan also sets strategic goals, it's very rational and natural that it also should be adopted by Parliament. So we decided that really strategic goals in National Development Plan should be adopted by Parliament, but all the rest of the document is adopted by the governments. So our nowadays National Development Plan 2021-2030, it wasn't organized by this procedure, but looking at the future after 2030, we will organize in this manner. And probably what else it's important to say that National Development Plan must be in compliance with other long-term strategies. Not always, not in all cases, it's document implementing, for example, national security strategy, because national security in Lithuania, it's not a secret, has lots of focus, and it's very interesting. It's very interesting and very important. And we have a little bit different branch, and you see from other levels of our strategic governance system this. And duration, it's 10 years. And probably what's also important to say, comparing with the street project progress strategy, that this document is linked with the finances. It's the first level and strategic level that we have some linkages with the financial projections, and because we know from our lessons learned from the previous period that if documents do not have their allocations, dedicated allocations, so it's quite difficult to talk about successful implementing of them. A little bit information about the figures, how our National Development Plan looks like. So we have 10 strategic goals, we have 75 development objectives, lots of impact indicators. Looking from nowadays perspective, I could say that we think that we have too many indicators, and probably after adopting Lithuania 2050, we would come back to amendments of National Development Plan. So we should focus on impact indicators number and our possibilities to achieve lots of impact, because we know that it's quite difficult to focus our attention to all areas and to progress in all areas at the same level. We should prioritize, and it's also related with our intended results we would like to achieve till 2030. And what's also important to mention that in the National Development Plan, we have 3 horizontal principles, and probably I elaborate about them a little bit more. Here you see how they are titled. We're talking about the innovativeness, sustainable development, and equal opportunities. All of these 3 principles have their own coordinators. It is line ministries. Ministry of Economy and Innovation is responsible for innovativeness and creativity. Sustainable development is area of Ministry of Environment, and Ministry of Social Security and Labor is responsible for equal opportunities horizontal principle. Well, why these principles are so important? Probably if we are talking about the cascades lower than National Development Plan, it means that all our investments and measures planned to implement National Development Plan, also National Progress Strategy for looking from the bottom to down, should comply with these horizontal principles. Not all measures, probably, and not all investments are directly aimed to these horizontal principles, but the minimum standard we had set it in Lithuania that all measures cannot worsen the situation of these three areas, and it's mandatory and obligatory, and all line ministries planning the investments should be in compliance with this. And here I just wanted to show probably just to imagine how we formulate our strategic goals and the national and development objectives in our national development plans, that you could have practical and real example of how we deal with it, what we are talking, at what level we will give the mandate to the parliament to accept, and what level will stay at the government level. So we have impact indicators for the goals, also for the development objectives, and we are coming to the quite big number of them. I hope so that we will share the slides, so I'll not stop here. And what I mentioned that...
Daiva, I'm sorry, I think I would have to interrupt here and ask you for a very brief summary of what you're finalizing statements, because your time is over.
Okay, thank you, Žvilė. Good, I have here. So this is our financing to strategic goals. It's a very important part, and it's good that we have it. As you see, our main source of financial allocations, there are EU funds and special funds, and we have an objective probably reason for this, because to plan state budget for 10 years is quite difficult. And here we have national development programs, the main implementation documents for implement national development plans. So probably I'll just say about the quantity we have and deal in Lithuania. So we have 23 sectorial development programs, 4 programs to strengthen national security. As I mentioned, we have a little bit different branch for this, and one regional development programs. All of them are prepared by this line ministries, adopted by government, except 3 national security programs. And as I mentioned, description of measures progress is the level of the bottom. It's important because here we plan the investments. Really, we did a huge difference between we did a lot of comparing with the last strategic governance system we had till 2020. Now we are looking for the best choice, best option to achieve our goals. And this is description of progress measures in figures. We have lots of them, and it's quite, I hope so that we will succeed with this amount of progress measures to implement all of them till 2030. But it's an issue also to concentrate everything, to coordinate to one comprehensive system. And probably the last my slide about the lessons we learned and why at the moment I could say that our strategy 2030 left just on paper. It was not implemented in practice. We assume that it was associated with one political party, and Erika will present you, elaborate more on how we changed all the development preparation process. But there are also some methodological issues also that we probably were not sure that this document had a proper place in the structure of other strategic planning documents. And despite the fact that also we had national development programs during the period 2014 and 2020, but there were no clear linkages with them. Of course, we have no any implications on budgeting, and as I mentioned earlier, it can be that it was one of our mistakes we did when we talked about the state progress strategy, because we were not reflecting on finances and the allocation we need, and just we were planning from inertia, and we get a situation that this document was not implemented in practice. And here probably I'll stop, just a photo. I could talk probably the situation. Our system is quite comprehensive, and we could talk a lot, but thank you.
Okay, we will have a chance to ask you a few questions after the next presentation, so do bear with us. We will hear from our Latvian colleagues, Latvia's strategic planning system from Latvia 2030 to action. And this will be presented by Head of the State Development Planning Department, Rudite Osvalde, and also Consultant Cross-Sectoral Coordination Department, State Chancellery, Republic of Latvia, Mara Simane. So thank you for joining us, and we are eager to hear from you.
And good morning, I'm Rudite. Have a nice day, have a good seminar. Please, Mara will give you a brief insight into Latvian long-term planning system. Please, Mara.
Hello, do you see my slides? Hello. Can you see my slides?
Not yet.
Okay. Try again.
I don't think we can see them yet.
I see that they're, are they there now? Do you see it?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much for having us. In this time where Latvia right now is being full of people coming to our song festival, which is starting next year. And we have the Ukrainians sitting in thinking, should they send their children to Latvian schools or keep online? So thank you very much for your attention, even to the Latvian system. What I think that we basically have a very similar systems, and we've had a similar history, and I think that plays a role in how we develop our planning. And we have some tendencies we want to avoid because of this. I mean, our history of Gosplan means that we have many people thinking that planning is on paper and everything else is implementation is a different story sometimes. Hopefully that's changing. Another thing, we have planning that went into turbo mode when we joined the EU and NATO and started up our systems after we made the transition. And I think we're not stopping the turbo mode that many more stable countries have had. So and on top of this, we're all living in a changing world. And I just want to show you a little bit in the first part of the presentation. I want to show you a little bit about what we do. And then after that, we'll have I'll have a second presentation where we'll talk more about the challenges. So right now you can see our center of government, and there's this National Development Affairs Division, and Rudite is the head of the National Development Planning section, and our colleague Sanita is here from the National Development Monitoring and Evaluation section, and we all coordinate our work together. So this is on behalf of us. I think what we do, just quickly, we improve the planning system. We have created the national development plans, the last two ones. Our Latvia 2030 was created in 2007, and it was passed by the parliament and then by the cabinet and then the parliament. I'll tell you about that later. We help the government people with the government declarations, and we also coordinate and put together the government action plans. So we know fully well what the feeling is when we are working with the politicians. We also are a secretariat to the National Development Council, but to be honest, that doesn't meet often. It was basically the structure of people who came together after the financial crisis of stakeholders that exists when we really need them. And also we work on horizontal reforms that the Prime Minister requests. History is important. I don't want you to read my slides, just listen to what I say. You can keep the slides later, but important for our history, we put a policy planning framework together. Framework is translated in different words in English. Framework, guidelines, it's a policy level. We put one together before we had a planning system. We put together a system for impact assessments and performance indicators. And then we developed a law on planning in 2008. And I compared your law and our law. There are many similarities, but many differences. You have more levels. You include also the Ministry of Defense, all of the planning regional levels and all of those. Ours is mainly on national development planning. And then we have a regulation, which is very good to read. If you translate, I put your law in Google Translate Lithuanian, Latvian, and it came out very well. So try to put our regulations. You can see our whole system basically that way. Basically, we keep the law states different planning principles, and the basics that I think you can read later about all of these. I think you talked about, Daiva mentioned most of them, and I will talk about them in the presentation. Most important, I think, is to keep a very clear hierarchy of what you can keep as much as possible, but have it flexible. A flexible but hierarchical system. That's what our system seems to be. And also to ensure subsidiarity. I see we have a participant from Denmark. The Danish government helped us a lot when we set up our government systems. And the principle of subsidiarity is a principle that hopefully is still intact in Denmark, but higher levels don't do what the lower levels know best. So this is interesting for national planning when you have top-down interests of things and bottom-up. We understand the devil is in the details. So often it's better to have a lot of input from a lot of the people at the bottom levels who know exactly what needs to be done, and that floats to the top. On the other hand, we always think we know better, at least politicians do, and sometimes civil servants at the top, how people should live. So this is an interesting aspect and we don't have the discussions enough, even at home, for this. Now, about our Latvian planning system, the parliament in 2005 put together a Latvia growth model where they said people are first. So that we consider our overarching ethics, ethos. But our national development, our 2030 strategy is our long-term strategy. And then underneath it, we have the development plans, sectoral policy frameworks, which are a little broader. They give you the fiscal space corridor that is also planned in the National Development Plan. And then there are sectoral policy plans. Then we also have conceptual reports. When you have idea, you need, those are also policy documents when you need to choose between two versions, one more expensive, less expensive, more efficient, less expensive. And then, as I said, we have regional development planning and local government planning, which shouldn't be in opposition to what's in Latvia 2030. It should go together, but it's loosely connected. So our Latvian Sustainable Development Project policy, same sort of ideas most likely you had in yours. But the good thing about it is the man in the corner, man with his hands opened, he was one of Latvia's first and foremost anthropologists with a degree from Cambridge. And he understood back in 2007 and 2008, it's important to work with people. So he and his team went through all of Latvia and worked with people. And I think you could say Latvia's sustainable development strategy at the time and for some time has been like a social contract. So I'm interested in your document, whether you did it yourselves or you did it with people. The question always is, people become new to a situation, and many of the younger generation might not remember 2010. I mean, time has passed. So the question is, how often do you update and renew things? And we don't have a clear answer on that either. So, but we like it because it actually, we even quote it, innovative and eco-efficient economy. So it's something that which is topical today. And we have the big indicators and we try to follow all of them, but we've never changed anything in this strategy. Then we have the National Development Strategy. We've had 3. The first one, just as Daiva mentioned, wasn't connected to financing, but then a special team of policy coordination people were put together to make sure it goes together with the planning. So now I'll show you how all of our planning, and then 2012 to 2021 was together, and our new framework is now 2021 to 27, more or less aligned with the EU planning cycles. But EU planning cycles will be changing, so that's a challenge for us too. But it's more or less aligned, because what is important is that we keep ensuring that our sovereignty is primary and that we're doing development which is needed for our country. Then we can be good participants in the European Union, because then we know what we want to say. So very good for Lithuania to think about 2050, because the EU is already planning beyond 2030, right? So we have 6 priority areas, and then we have 18 areas of direction. The previous plan was much more narrow. We came out of the financial crisis, and we tried to keep the fiscal space tight and only put real priorities. And everybody saw that those priorities actually were financed. And so that's why everybody wanted to be in this framework. And now it's almost everything about everything. So that's a challenge too. It's called gamification in English. Every stakeholder wants to succeed, so they want to use the planning system to get their things, but we have limited resources. So here we see under the priorities, there are directions, and under the directions, there are measures. And it's very important that we have the responsible authority, and then we have co-responsible authorities. This helps us very much in the next level of planning when the ministries are putting together their material. We also have an indicative financial plan that once we put this together, we ask the ministries to please send us what they think it will cost to do everything. So they sent all their wishes, and it was like 4 times the amount of money we had. So we had a little bit of time, not enough, to discuss with them what we cut off. So some of the indicators but they didn't adjust some of the things here. I'm already talking about weak points. So we have very high wishes for improving poverty reduction, but we need 5 times the amount of money that actually the fiscal space that we allocated during this period. But and so there are some challenges. Next time, lessons learned, we really have to ensure that we tune the performance indicators to the amount of money we really have, not to the wishes of the government. And from that national development plan, that was a start position for the Ministry of Finance to start planning EU funding. But the devil is in the details. So we have all sorts of sectoral plans that describe the details and have the more information which is necessary so that we can say, yes, we don't actually finance things out of the National Development Plan. We finance them out of national plans, sectoral plans, and the sectoral frameworks. And then we have the government declaration, everybody's favorite thing to do. And please excuse me if I speak for 20 minutes, and because I'll keep it short for the second presentation. The government declaration is short. Fortunately, we've had longer governments recently. And what we have there, we have more like output indicators. And we don't tie this to the budget here. They don't, in this government declaration, we don't say how much money will be put in, but we say when something will be done, responsible, who's not responsible. And you see these little 171, 170 in this, those are the National Development Plan measures. So we keep a chain and a link, and it's important not to lose that chain because everybody wants to have everything done. And if we lose the chain, we can't report. So just some useful instruments quickly from our planning system. One thing is our legislation, our portal, which has all the regulations and legislation. And it's going to be, I missed something. This is our policy planning document database, which we have. So all the policies and plans, even the past, are there. And you can filter them according to topics, etc. But this is going to be integrated now into this Likumi LV, which is our legislative framework. And Rudita has been working so hard to make sure that we don't lose the functionality on this. Here is our new thing. This is our new star baby. It's called Single Portal for Harmonization of Draft Legal Acts, but including plans. And everything you can do online, and everything's available, and most of it is open to civil society to see. So supposedly it's easier. Our one thing that we're learning already is that we're missing the fact that post-COVID, we don't have the meetings to harmonize physically and presently because we have such a nice internet portal. And so we can do everything mechanically. We lose the feedback that you have from the body language. We lose the compromises you can make or the discussions at the coffee table when we're trying to harmonize things. I think we lose real quality. And if we continue this way, chat boxes can win. I mean, we need to get the human element back in. And then we have a very nice research and publication database, which my colleague Sanita here has been working on quite a lot, where all of the public research that is commissioned by the ministries and institutions has to be put in here. So if you're looking for evidence on the policies, you can even look in what the ministries have required. That's one of the instruments. Where am I now? Okay, but quickly about financing policies. So with this model, we have no finance tied to Sustainable Development Strategy. National Development Plan has this indicative fiscal space. Sectoral policy framework should go together with it. EU funds are initiated with this. Then we have sectoral plans which have very precise funding amounts and also output and outcome documents, outcome indicators, but mostly output. And then the funds are programmed. That's very fast. Information on that. So this is the budget interface that I said that we had the indicative table. So the ministry sent about what measure, and then they said how much, and then they said from what kind of financing plan. Is it from the private sector? Is it from the state projects? Is it from EDAF or whatever? And then the interesting thing is the annual budget preparation. For some reason, back in 2012, the finance ministry became so friendly with the cross-sectoral coordination unit that we had, that we worked on a lot of things together. And one of the things is the proposals for priority measures. So every year, the government, all the ministries submit priority proposals, and they send them directly to the Ministry of Finance and directly to us. And we split the tasks. The Ministry of Finance looks at everything, and we look at, does it go together with the declaration? Does it go together with the medium-term priorities? Does it have an impact on performance indicators, etc.? And then we rank them, basically, and we send that information to the Ministry of Finance, which includes it into the discussions with the politicians. And it is a dimension that the politicians can look at. To be honest, often politicians forget that they have to look at a broader perspective, and sometimes they think their attention more is on their song festival called voting than their attention is on the big picture. So that's always a challenge. Then another thing is when the budget is approved, then we have budget explanations that come together with the budget, and they're very detailed, and the finance ministry works them together with the ministries. And so the ministries actually put a lot of information there, including the explanations with the indicators. So that's a way we can tie things together. And then, because we live in an imperfect world, we can never ensure that everything gets instituted. Once in a while, which is every year, the finance ministry calls together the state chancellery, finance ministry, Bank of Latvia, other important stakeholders, and they decide on spending reviews, because we have to get money, because all of our planning system plans only additional money. It doesn't plan, we don't have a zero-based budgeting or performance budgeting. So we always have to take something away to put it into the additional spending for achieving the results in our plans. So for example, this year we are doing a total review of the Ministry of Health. And another thing is an analysis of what's being put into the higher education system for research and development. We know that we love research and development. We want to put lots of money in it. What are the results of it? Is it giving us something, or is it giving us results? So those are just a few things that they look at. They also look at they just tear apart the ministry budgets. The first year they got a lot of money, and now it is said that it's very difficult because the ministries have such a limited amount of funding and they have so many things to do. But as the spending review is now looking this year also at mobile applications that are being used, and reviews of how IT is used, etc. So basically, I wanted to stop with that and talk about monitoring, etc. in the next portion. How was it with time? Was it okay?
Well, actually, we would ask you to be as brief as you can, because we're off the limit already, and we have
I'm finished.
Run out of time. Okay.
I'm finished.
Totally?
Yes,
okay.
Totally, with that section.
But you want to still present another section?
That's further in the program.
Okay, so if you're finished now, I just want to double check. When you say that the challenges you experience are mostly to do with finance, do I understand this correctly? Because you said that previously you did not understand that you have to not think about the wishful budget, but the actual budget to tune performance indicators with the amount of money you really have, not the wishes. And then also another challenge is that politicians don't always see the big picture. Would you say that these two are the biggest challenges in terms of implementing national strategies in Latvia?
I have a list of strategies at the end of the next presentation, but I think you've hit the nail on the head. Maybe Rudita, do you have some comments? Maybe in Latvian I can translate if you want. Rudita, anything else? Is that right?
No, it's all right, I think.
Yeah, precisely. Those are always challenges. It's not like you all of a sudden, discover this. You discovered at one point in time, then you try to fix that, then you discover the next section and you try to fix that. Never-ending story.
Okay. Okay, so we'll talk about monitoring the strategies in Latvia a bit later. Thank you now. Mara, we will now dwell on the Danish fiscal planning and implementation. This presentation will be delivered by Head of Office at Macro Political Center at the Ministry of Finance in the Kingdom of Denmark, and that's Paul Lasenius Kramp. He's with us now. Thank you for joining, and we're all ears.
Thank you. Let's see if I can get it up. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can. Thank you. It says fiscal planning and implementation in Denmark.
Yes, exactly. So thank you very much for the invitation and some very interesting discussions. I think so at the Ministry of Finance, we've focused a lot on the fiscal space, and I think the planning, sort of long-term planning in Denmark is focused or is coming from the fiscal space. So we do the planning by looking at how much money, how is the fiscal space, and then trying to allocate how to use this fiscal space. So the planning is sort of integrated from the fiscal space. So it's not sort of what you would like to do. It's how much space, how much money do you have to spend, and then you try to allocate this. So it's perhaps a bit another way around than the previous presentations. And therefore, it's very important that the planning that you do of the public consumption actually is also what is actually being implemented. So if you plan to use so many billions in one area, that's actually how many billions you use, and not more or less. And that's why it used to be a problem to a large extent that it was the actual consumption turned out to be much higher than what was planned, especially in the municipalities, but also in the regional and state level. So that's sort of why we have a budget law now, which has been working very nicely. So this is just sort of to say that where we came from a period where the actual consumption was much higher than the planned. And then we did the budget law, where there's it's a law, so there's a mechanical penalty if you for the municipalities and the regional if they don't comply with the budget. So this is what you saw, that they came into effect, the budget law, and immediately actually there was underspending for quite a few years as everybody was afraid sort of to overspend and have a penalty. But as you got used to how the system, the new system was working, the underspending has diminished quite a lot, and has been quite small. And then of course we had the COVID years where budgets sort of flew up and down, and it was quite difficult to manage. But the system is flexible enough to actually handle this sort of one-time events. Okay, so actually, how do we then figure out how much money to spend? Sort of looking at a longer range. So we want the fiscal to be sound, the fiscal, and so national debt has to be in a stable projection. So we sort of start from the long term, that we have to have a sustainability in the fiscal sustainability. So we do a long projection, where of course it's mainly demographics and pension laws that are driving the budget, and then we sort of from there we go back, and then we have a target as present for present. It's in 2030. We have a target for how much should the structural deficit be, and of course in 2030 we don't have a view on the business cycle position, so the actual budget and the structural balance should be the same. So we have a target there. Presently it's -0.5% of GDP. So as the economy grow, then having a target of -0.5% of GDP will indicate that quite low and stable debt level. So that's how we say, okay, so we have a target that the structural deficit can be -0.5% of GDP. Then we have projections for how the economy is going to develop up till 2030, and therefore we have projections for how, if you don't change the laws, how much income, how are the taxes going to develop. And then, given we have the target of -0.5%.
Yeah, sorry, Paul.
Yes.
Which screen are you sharing? Because we're stuck on the first screen, I think so.
Are you stuck on the first?
Yeah.
I have integrated fiscal planning from long-term fiscal bill. No.
We're still seeing the first slide as the main one.
Yeah, and please, can you do the full screen of your sharing, if that's possible?
I thought I did that. Yeah, I see now. Now it's changing for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it changing?
Now we see integrated fiscal planning from long-term to fiscal bill, but I think it's not full screen yet, is it?
It's not full screen. It's full screen on mine.
Okay, so if we move to the next slide, do we see the movement? Could you go to the, yeah, I think it works.
Yeah, but I don't know how, whenever I put full screen, it sort of, it gets, can you see the changes now? I'm changing slide.
No.
No. So I don't know how to do the full screen. It comes up as full screen on mine and I can change, but can you see it if it's like this and it's not full screen?
Yeah, I think that it's better than seeing the slide number 1. I think it's good now. Integrated fiscal planning from long-term to fiscal bill.
Okay. Yes. So it's sort of so the point here is that we sort of start at the long run. We want to be sustainable. Then we set a target in now 2030. Given this target and the progress, the forecast for the economy, we have how much income we are going to get, and then given the target, we can also put a path for expenditure. So how much can expenditure grow? And then this expenditure path is put into law. So that's the ceilings, and it's being the expenditure path is being implemented by putting ceilings on how much the state can use, how much the regions can use, and how much the municipalities can use. Yes, so that's sort of how we do we come from the long term, and then we know how much money we can use in going forward. So this is sort of how to try to explain the fiscal space that we get. When the politicians are trying to figure out how much to allocate to different areas, they can use the fiscal. So we have a given level, for instance, in 2021, and you can keep that level in real terms. And then as the economy grows, income grows, and you can have expenditure growing as well. That's the top blue line. And then, of course, you can have reprioritizations. So there can be expenses that are temporary. For instance, during COVID, a lot of temporary expenses, or that you have a research program that is temporary, or so on. So there are a lot of expenses that sort of run out all the time. So that's the light blue line. And then out in here it's 2025, you sort of have the fiscal space. and that's how much money they can use. So when they do the planning, and we are working right now on a new plan for 2030, then it's trying to allocate the fiscal space. So that's how the medium term is planned. So there's the fiscal space from above the line, so that's from growth. There's fiscal space below the line, sort of from expenditures that is running out, and then the focus when the politicians are prioritizing and we have to do the planning, it's how much money do we have, and then how much money do we use in different areas. So here I just put priority 1, 2, 3, but presently, of course, the big priorities is defense. So that's a big chunk. Then there's a big chunk in sort of just welfare. So the present government, they have a priority that as the welfare should keep up to the present level at least. So this is going to cost a lot of money in the future, basically because we are growing older. So we have demographic headwinds. So fewer people in the labor force and more people retired. And of course, retired people need more care and more demand, there's higher health spending. So when the democracy goes against you, keeping up sort of the welfare is a big priority, and it's a big chunk of the money. And then there's the green transition, which is sort of priority 3, which is also a fairly big chunk. And then of course you can have the politicians have a lot of other wishes. So there's health, there's education, and there could be tax cuts. So of course you can also use the fiscal space. It's not just how to increase expenses. You can also use the fiscal space to reduce taxes. But then that's the politicians who should try to decide, and of course we try to help them. But basically they try to fill out the right-hand side of this. So we give them the funding, and then they can try to figure out how much how to prioritize. Of course, they can also increase the funding by making reforms. So if they want more money to spend on other things, they have to find it first. So the discussions here are always, I mean, you might have priorities, but how are you going to finance it? It's always based on how are you going to finance it. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So as Mara was also saying, it's a lot less centralized, perhaps, than in other countries. That it's sort of these big chunks. So it's you have a prioritize. You want to prioritize defense spending. Then the government put out a proposal to say, okay, we want to increase defense spending by 20 billion a year in 2030. So that's sort of the goal. And then they are going to the parliament and negotiating with other parties and making a multi-year agreement for the defense area in how to spend 20 billion, for instance. And when during the negotiations they figure out they want to spend 25 billion, they also have to tell how are they going to finance this. So is it going to be financed by prioritizing other things less, or is it going to be financed by new reforms that can generate income? And then they have these multi-year agreements, and then it's the Ministry of Defense who is going to implement this multi-year agreement that the government together with the parliament is agreeing on. And that is sort of how it's all being done in the big chunks. So the government, they propose big chunks of money that they want to allocate to different areas, and then you do agreements with the parliament, or presently we have a majority government, so in principle they can do just by themselves. But for instance, if it's a defense strategy, it's nice that it's a broad agreement where it's not just the government, because the government there will be elections every 4 years, and a new government might come in, and hopefully you don't want to rethink the whole thing after just 4 years if it's a big priority. So you try to make agreements with a broad part of parliament for the very large expenditures. Yes. I'm just looking if I should remember other things.
Paul, just a very brief reminder that we would also ask you to start wrapping up, because the time is nearly over as well. So if you could just say finalizing sentences, we would very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course. Okay. So this is just the budget framework for the expenditure ceilings. An important one is point 3, that how we do the calculations of the fiscal space. It's only adapt to structural reforms that are included in the projections, and it follows the principles of the Ministry of Finance, how we evaluate the policy effects from any given reform. So it's the Ministry of Finance, our calculations, that determines how much money a given reform will generate. So this is, I've already talked about this, the expenditure ceilings that the central government, municipalities and regional level. And then just to wrap up, the control is that the expenditure ceilings, it's the Danish Economic Councils who sort of approve. And so it's Statistic Denmark who do the audits and publish all the public statistics, and then the Danish Economic Council, an independent group, can sort of verify that we have that the expenditure ceilings are not broken, and that we follow the budget law. Yes. So one final thing, the budget law it's the very important part is that it's not sort of it's not limiting the politicians. They can actually decide whatever they do, whatever they want, but they have to do it ex ante. So when you decide how much money you want to spend, that's how much money you spend. So it's always more difficult if you afterwards sort of ask for forgiveness for having used too much money. Then who should you blame? Is it the municipalities? Is it the central government? Why have you spent more money than you're supposed to? It's difficult. Here it's sort of, you can plan to use a lot of money, also more money than you have, but you do it ex ante up front. So it's sort of everybody can see it, and that's why I think it's a very disciplinary system that we have, because nobody wants to sort of ex ante say we are spending more money than we have. Okay, so I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted a brief follow-up. I understand that the budget law basically saved all of the issues for you, but then it was very interesting to see that the underspending was going on because people feared fines, basically. And yes. I just wondered where they would have gotten money for fines if they, had already spent too much money.
Okay, so the fines are in the following year budget. So it's just that you cut the budget for the next year.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So we can discuss maybe later if anybody was actually fined in the end. But thank you so much for that questions. We hope we will have time for questions at the end of Mara's speech, because Mara will now dwell on monitoring the strategies in Latvia and a little bit more on the challenges and the lessons learned. Please, Mara. I cannot hear you. I don't know if that's just me or whether nobody can hear Mara at this moment.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Can you see the slides?
Yes, Latvia Sustainable Development Strategy 2030, Latvia 2030.
Right. So monitoring the strategies, right? This is part 2. Monitoring the strategies, challenges, and lessons learned. We thought those are 2 separate things, but actually one of the challenges is monitoring the strategies. Why is it a challenge? Because everybody wants to, all the academic institutions, et cetera, want to do a lot of monitoring. Monitoring is often very expensive. Monitoring can be very detailed. Monitoring can be very general. So it's hard to pitch the level of monitoring that is the most useful at a certain time. Because it all costs money. And people in Latvia with limited resources prefer spending money on the actions rather than only on monitoring. Here is how we do our monitoring and evaluation. We haven't done any monitoring and evaluation on Latvia 2030 yet. We're thinking that we'll be thinking about that in the future, definitely in the next few years. But what we do is we ensure ex ante, basically for our national development plans. Then in the midterm, we have a midterm evaluation, which is a big thing. Every other year, we monitor for progress, and the Prime Minister goes to the Parliament on that. And then we also monitor for we ensure that the plans are going in accordance with the sectoral plans go in total tangents, in a dance with the National Development Plan. Another thing we like to monitor now is tracking the real investments. So we use all of our measures in the National Development Plan, and then we take from all of the things that are passed in the budget, once the budget has gone through the Parliament too, and then we look, what are the new political initiatives that have been approved? Which measure do they go under? What are the fiscal effects of tax changes? You know how there are many ad hoc budget changes, allocations that the government made. In Latvian, it's līdzekļi neparedzētiem gadījumiem. I'm sure you have something similar. So we just, we add those because they can add up to a lot. And we also put in EU funding monies, and then we see how much for each of the measures we can do. This would be a very good instrument, potentially, because you could say, oh, look at this. The political party's favorite topic is this. Look at how much money they spent on this. Look at how little they spent on this. No reason. Of course, we don't get any resources, results, because we don't have the money allocated. But we don't do much of that potential with the tracking investments that we have. One thing is lessons learned for us as far as monitoring is an evaluation. You can monitor and evaluate as much as you want, but in the information age, that all disappears into the big sea, the big ocean of monitoring and evaluation papers. And then people say, oh, that's just a paper. So it's really, really important to use the evaluation information for something. Do we use the evaluations to change our past documents? For example, do we do a midterm evaluation of the National Development Plan? Do we change the National Development Plan? No, we don't. We understand that these are the things that should be changed. We put those in recommendations. We allow those changes to take place, but we use the midterm evaluation as our ex ante for the next period. We're forward looking. We don't spend our time trying to change the past, because then you open up a can of worms. Everybody wants to change everything. So that's what the system entails. And so one thing is important, the Prime Minister has reports to the Parliament both on the government declarations and on the National Development Plan together with the Latvia 2030. Because in broad terms, those progress indicators in 2030 are always programmed through the development plan. Sectoral policies get monitored at that level. Then another place to use information on monitoring and evaluation is the Parliament's Sustainable Development Commission. Fortunately, we have a commission that only thinks about sustainable development. They don't pass legislation, so they invite us to give them reports on everything all the time. The next thing is that we have when we do midterm evaluations, we've had evaluations and conferences. And this is where you get politicians and other important stakeholders on board about the big picture changes. Here we have a picture from our previous evaluation, because we don't have a new National Development Plan, that it was our Minister of Finance talking to the head of the Latvian Employers Confederation about the results we had. And they're talking about what should be changed. And they are definitely people who are interested in the changes before the next development plan, so they will happen. And that's flexible. Fortunately, those stakeholders change because politicians in our countries keep popping up, new politicians. Now the woman who was the Employers Confederation person is now our Minister of Health. So she gets to be on the other side of the table. And then also, we also use as a monitoring and evaluation tool Latvia's review to the United Nations on Sustainable Development Goals. I just quickly want to explain how this goes together. Everybody has their wishes on what they want our countries to do. We have to keep to a simple framework, hierarchical, where we can keep it all together, so we avoid no national development plans without financing it all. Some wishful words that are greenwashing for the EU because we want to do something. So so what we did is we used our voluntary review next year. I know Lithuania is doing theirs this year at the UN in July report. We used our report to do, where we have the arrows. We assessed our progress to the 169 targets of the Sustainable Development Goals. So there's 17 goals and bunches of targets. And to the extent we evaluated the targets, because it was from our ex post from Latvia 2020, our old Latvian National Development Plan. And then where we say key actions and reforms, that's what we put in bullets, in simple words, what is in our new National Development Plan, easy to understand for foreigners. If they want to think in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals is the lingua franca to talk about policy now. The European Union is going towards more reporting on the reform programs through the Sustainable Development Goals. We have to learn to work with them, and we've been trying. And how we did it, we made a mapping in an Excel table with the targets. We put all our Latvia 2030 indicators, our national development policy indicators, and our sectoral policy documents. And then we knew everything that we really do and what we've really committed to and what our cabinet committed to. And that is what we're going to do for sustainable development. It's not just a bunch of nice words. And here, just a final picture that I have is, here is our there are UN summits every 4 years. This year all governments, this year in September, have to give our national commitments, what we will do for sustainable development. We have to figure out what to say, and we have to say it because it happens and we are committed. So we're going to be taking what we're committing in our government and talking about that. And right here we see that in the first picture, our first president that went when the Sustainable Development Goals were accepted by all countries in 2015. The next week, we invited all of our planners, and we said, from all of the ministries, and we said, we work with you, you're our team. Tell us, how are we going to deal with this? And they said, let's monitor it with our indicators, and then we'll know what we're doing. That's Latvia's approach. So it's very important also when we're trying to implement something, we keep the team of planners informed and that they feel they have ownership. Important when we work on things that we keep the politicians informed and that they have ownership. because after a while they need the ownership. That's what 2050 is doing for you, because 2030 didn't have the ownership. This is all very difficult. Oh, and here's a picture of our next president in the very last one. He will be the one going and giving the new. He was our foreign minister before. So these are important things. And my final, I'm over the time, sorry. Planning is a tool. These are our challenges and lessons learned. Planning is a tool for political decision makers. They ultimately make the decisions. So we can plan as beautifully as we can. It's only what we can do. We can't be responsible for all that. Planning continuity is important, especially on adopted decisions of previous governments who goes through pain with something, they care about it. So that's a challenge. We have to remember that every policy has incoherencies, and it's not, you can't have policy coherence for development on everything. There are different, you have to have balance. Balance means compromises. Compromises means one side is angry, the other side is angry. You have to accept that there are things, the world isn't perfect. Next, what I mentioned, we're forward looking. We don't change documents in midterm mostly. And that people would say, oh, you don't keep up. We don't care right now because we don't want to be just taking care of the tails. Available financial resources are always an issue, as we spoke before. And we want to make sure that when we work with evidence, that's cost effective. So, and we're changing this planning world. And Rudita's final message that she says that is very important always to think about is, you have evidence and you have goals. And then those are the easier parts. Then you have the resources and the action, which is the harder parts. And we have to transform that into that we know something, we can do it, and we actually take action. That's it from us.
Okay, thank you. And when you said that you wanted to show a picture of the next president, I did not see it on the slide, but
okay,
you didn't mean the anthropologist.
Okay, no. Here is our next president, Edgar Srinkevich. And here is a person who was one of the candidates and another candidate. And our presidents are elected not as yours, but through the parliament. The parliament elects them. And so he's successful. He's also very pro support for Ukraine. So you can be assured that he will keep that stance at the UN too.
But when you say that we don't change documents halfway through, didn't you also sort of say that it's important to monitor and to see what kind of conclusions you can make? And then what if you talk about what's wrong in the strategy and then you never change it?
You change the next strategy.
Right.
And you can work on your policies and you can work on what you're doing sectorally. You can change those strategies.
And Paul,
and you can change the short-term plans. So for example, our plans are longer-term frameworks for the sectoral level are 7 years, but we have 3-year plans, many 3-year plans, many 2-year plans, a few 1-year plans, and then you just incrementally change something. From plan A to plan B, if it's not in the National Development Plan, but you change it because there's results that have changed, that's very legitimate.
So can I ask a question? So I get a little bit confused about how you use indicators. So in Denmark, I think we use indicators mainly sort of as a tool to identify areas where you need to have some policy action. And then sometimes you can also use indicators for sort of following if you are actually developing as you want. But it's sort of both. But I'm not sure exactly how do you go from indicators to actual reforms? So you have an indicator, you identify some area that you feel you should develop, and then you have to make a reform. You have to do something. How do you do that step?
So we have indicator that we have for a concrete thing. One of the things in the National Development Plan, which was done in an inclusive process with many stakeholders, divided into 6 groups, they recognize that we have to do something about the future generations as far as monitoring them in schools, because because there's a lot of bullying going on, for example. One of the many indicators is in our national development plan is reducing the amount of bullying for ages 11, 13, and 15 or something like that. Then the ministries, which ministries are responsible, and then they come together and then they have to develop a sectoral policy on this. It can be a horizontal policy because in our national development plan, we say one minister is responsible for the, some sort of a measure on it. And the measure in the national development plan is rather round. Improve the situation for children, da, 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 da. And then they come together and then they work out the real action oriented stuff, which is the plans. Or the EU funding, which also needs additional work to it.
And they know how much money they can spend? Do they have a budget?
Initially, they know the fiscal space that we have put together allocated underneath the indicative framework under the National Development Plan, which was given by the Finance Ministry. And then and then they know how much EU funding is possible to allocate indicatively. And the state budget issues depend on what they write in their plans, because the devil is in the details. If you tell them, here, you have 2 million, just go for it. Then you won't get something. So what you do is they put the plan together and they say, it'll cost this much. Then we say, wait a second, that's 10 times more than it was in the National Development Plan. Stop it, stop it, stop it. Sometimes they do stop it, sometimes the politicians don't. And then they put the plan together. And then we have the annual budget process where they submit the budgets to the Finance Ministry and to us. And we say, yes, there's a plan. The plan is sound. It goes together with the indicators. It goes with the National Development Plan. There's kind of a chain.
How about you, Paul? You have mentioned that the Danish Economic Council, I think that's the organ that can verify the expenditure ceilings, and is a sort of an independent body, right?
Yes.
That you can go to. How often do you use their services, or is that every time? How does it work technically?
Okay, so they have several tasks. So I mean, they monitor the economy as well, but for the monitoring, so they have each year to verify that the budget law has been upheld, and we have not used more money than we were supposed to. So of course, Statistic Denmark, they do all the accounting and they can verify. So it's relatively easy and uncontroversial. So that's one part, and then the other part is that they also sort of monitor the way we calculate effect from reforms. So I think in Denmark, the main focus of reform is supply side reforms. So how to increase labor participation, how to increase productivity, so on. So basically how to increase your fiscal space. So that's a main effort. But then of course you have to evaluate what is the impact on the economy from a given reform, and we do all the calculations, and then they monitor if they agree with the sort of calculations that we do. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Your microphone is switched off.
A question rather, sorry about this, Mara, to you. We have to measure the impact on the economy of every reform. This is what I hear from the Danish government, basically. Is that what we do in Latvia and Lithuania, just to understand, to measure the economic impact of every reform?
We measure lots of different impacts, I think. So part of it is impact. We add things that are also, one of our measures is improving the economic situation in Latvia. So we have a direction which is on employment and labor issues. Another one is on improving the investments that come into the country. We have a section on tax reform. So those things are all planned in the framework of the National Development Plan. So we made a decision that we're doing like tax reforms only once in a period for each government. We don't want to do millions of tax reforms. So we're invest under that. That in and of itself, the measures within our National Development Plan in and of itself look at economic issues. So it's different. It's not that we're being led by the economic issues. Also, we notice that what's taking place in the EU is, like you mentioned, governance, economics, and social issues. There's governance, there's social, economic, and environment issues that are at the forefront now of the EU too. So there are different dimensions that have to be examined. It all gets balanced out. But we definitely have a country that is pro keeping the budget deficit low. And that's kind of like a Bible thing for us. So.
Which I assume doesn't always necessarily happen, but pro keeping, it does happen. Pro keeping the budget deficit low. So that's your goal, right? That's very...
Yeah, that's the budget system is so that we get a graphic, a calendar plan of what takes place every year annually. So we have the macroeconomic financial thing that the Ministry of Finance sends out. The government approves that. The Parliament looks at it. Then they have the next level is allocating the amount of money that can be spent in the annual budgets. What is the fiscal space for that year truly? And then all the ministries take all of their priority things and they prioritize them in order of what they think is the most important of all of them, looking at their whole agenda and all their strategic actions. And then those are the ones that we actually evaluate. We evaluate them and nothing over the fiscal space gets accepted. And the ministries never spend money without the cabinet's approval, above anything that's in the budget.
Okay, thank you for this. We'll move to our final bit. Given that we started 3 minutes late, we are only lagging 5 minutes behind, which means that we will still have our final presentation, and whatever is left time-wise, we will use it for the general discussion to maybe extract even more practical steps of how it's all being done, even though it has already been quite practical in terms of Paul's questions about how specifically performance indicators, where do they go and how does that turn into action and so on and so forth. So thank you, everybody. I think this is really useful and interesting. So we move to the next presentation from the Lithuanian's perspective, and then we'll have time for questions. Let's hope that this presentation will not exceed 15 minutes, but given it's 2 people, I can only have my highest of hopes, and I will want to give the floor to the PhD Senior Policy Analyst Erika Vaiginienė, and also Senior Policy Analyst at the Government Strategic Analysis Center, Dovilė Gaidžiauskienė, and they will talk about the Lithuanian National Strategy 2050 and the next challenges ahead.
Yeah, so thank you for a presentation of us. And do you see my presentation already?
I think we can see the opening slide, the title slide.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So yeah, that was a huge project, and a huge team was working. Not huge, team was not big. The main team was not big, but there were more persons than just me and Dovilė. And I know that Austėja is sitting in the same conference now, and there are a few more persons who are not with us today. But they did quite a lot for development of a strategy. So Lithuania 2050, it was developed by using foresight methodology, and it is different methodology from traditional strategic management methodology, traditional strategic planning methodology. And the first steps were done in 2020. Then we established a future committee in our parliament, and also there were some changes done in the law of strategic governance. Also, why we did it in a different way, not in a traditional planning way, but in foresight planning way. It's because also we got recommendations from the OECD that Lithuania should start to plan by looking to the future. So that was foreseen in our law, and in our law, this long-term strategy means that it is longer than 20 years, or it plans for longer period than 20 years, and it demonstrates the vision, key development directions, and impact indicators. All other stuff is created later on, and the whole system of our strategic management you already seen. It was presented by Daiva, so I'm not going to repeat that slide. So this Lithuania 2050, it was obligation of our new government. Now it's not new, but at that time it was a new government, and also it was obligation of our prime minister, current prime minister. So that was the background why we started, and we started to plan this long-term strategy, like 2050. As I told, it was prepared according to foresight methodology. So first of all, we started by preparation of this methodology. We planned the whole steps, what we will do, how we will do, and when we will do. There were some small changes on the way, but mainly we went quite well through all this procedure. And currently we are in the last stage, and today this Lithuania 2050 it will be presented to our parliament already in afternoon. So here you see some main activities which we did for horizon scanning. We analyzed megatrends. We, of course, evaluated current status. We analyzed foreign practices. Also, we did workshops for identification of weak signals. We have intellectual forum, which is organized every week by the Committee of the Future in the Parliament. So after horizon scanning, we went through insights from different stakeholders, and also there were many of initiatives. Later on, I will show the numbers, how many people were involved in this activity, and finally, then we gathered all the information, all ideas from stakeholders. So we went to the development stage, to the document development stage, and then we developed scenarios. We tested those scenarios, and still we didn't do what if scenarios. We plan to do it in autumn, but it will not be already included in the strategy. It will be separated a little bit as a different activity. So we did it in a very short period. Usually for this kind of strategy to prepare, you need 3-4 years. So we did it in 1 year and a half, and it really means that we were working on quite big pressure and very intensive process. We had around 200 co-creating non-governmental organizations who really participated in the process and gave their ideas for the strategy. So in total, we had 51 events related with the development of a strategy, and there were 2,500 people included. So you in previous presentations, there were quite a lot told that money are very important for implementation, I agree that money means a lot, but people means more. So if we can imagine that at least everyone from those 2,050 persons could involve 10 persons for the implementation of a strategy, we would have already quite a huge number of people who implement the strategy. So here just I showed to you that there were quite a lot of activities and numbers of the people which were involved and where we invited just citizens or co-creators to make their input into the development of the strategy. Later on, I don't want to stop here, just show you that in every stage, people were co-creators were involved and we had opportunity to put their input into the development of a document. Okay, so a little bit of the content, what we got. So after several workshops, after horizon scanning activities, we did sense-making workshops during which we identified critical change factors for Lithuania, and all participants agreed that the main two critical factors for change in Lithuania are education and democracy. So we used those two indicators for the development of 4 scenarios, and they formed the main axis of the scenarios. So we finally got 4 scenarios, and the first scenario was speaking about the Brave New World, which means that there is a mainly autocratic management in Lithuania, and but very well developed education. The second scenario means that we have a well developed education and democratic regime. The third scenario speaks about muddling through. It means that we have democracy, but not developed education. And finally, the fourth scenario shows us what could happen if we have autocratic regime and not developed education. So it's like a permafrost. So the people from Soviet period quite well can understand what it means. After we developed scenarios, we went through the development or identification of strategic ambitions, and this process also was quite huge. We gathered more than 400 ideas for those strategic ambitions. What could be the strategic ambitions of Lithuania, and we did a big analysis of those ideas. Afterwards, we did workshops. We once again discussed with co-creators, and finally we got those 5 main strategic ambitions for Lithuania, which now are included in our document, vision document. So it is first ambition is a citizen-led democracy, reliable, open, and mobilizing. And mainly it speaks about changes in the governance of Lithuania, and of course in the mindset of Lithuanian people. The second strategic ambition speaks about a future-ready, resilient, and free person living in a community that cares. So here we cover education. Here we cover social aspects and also health. The third ambition is Lithuanian business, science, art sustainably create high value for the world. It means that if we create something, we create what is suitable for not only for us, but also for the world. It shows some ambition for global competitiveness. Fourth strategic ambition is about a resilient state, a constructive and influential player in global politics. Here we understood that if we want to succeed with all current political environment which is around us, and if we want to succeed to keep democracy in Lithuania, we should be proactive in proactive global player in the politics. And finally, the fourth ambition is like a connected country, sustainable and balanced development, what means that government should create conditions for good life in Lithuania, and country should be connected not only by infrastructure, but also people should live in the communities and help each other, and sustainability with the environment and everything balanced, and economy balanced also. After we developed those strategic ambitions, we went to the next stage, and that was development of the vision statement. And that was also the procedure, which took several months. And it was, there were several examples of the statement, and we discussed it with citizens. And we did even the survey of the citizens. And finally, we got to the statement which you see here. So our vision is guiding light Lithuania, a country where I want to live and create, a country I want to protect. I think you understand that it makes an emphasis on the person. It means not only government cares about the Lithuania, but also everyone who lives in Lithuania and who maybe not live, but loves Lithuania, also cares about Lithuania and wants to live here.
Erika, I want to stop you here and just ask you, maybe you could move on to a sentence or two on what you see as possible difficulties in terms of implementation of this specific strategy.
Here is implementation stage. It's like from the last stage was road mapping, and if you do not have a roadmap and you do not know how to implement this, what you wrote in a nice sentences, it will be too difficult, to implement it. So we did a road mapping, and it's much more bigger, but what we communicate, it is presented here, and we developed like a very leveraged initial map of activities. But of course, we have done much more, and everything is done will be included into this national progress plan, which will be reviewed. So that was just a beginning stage, and now we get to the next stage, like execution. It means like implementation of what we planned. What could be the most difficult things? Here I just wanted to show that currently that's difference from the Lithuania 2030, that this strategy also already has its path into the other documents, strategic documents like National Development Program, like national programs and so on. We have okay, I skip those principles, how we plan to implement, but principle is the same, always looking to the future and involving citizens as much as possible. And also we are in the stage of the development of the Lithuania 2050 implementation ecosystem. So I think one of the challenges will be how the responsibilities will be divided between the institutions and how they will be institutionalized in all the public sector. Of course, we do a lot, and for example, now we have a project with OECD, with which we educate public sector how to work with this anticipatory governance, because what I noticed myself during this process of planning, that first of all, you have to train a person to think about the future. Only after that you can plan for the future. So now we do this training for the public sector, and I hope that I myself I see the biggest challenge to educate everyone to think about the future.
But what does that mean specifically? Train people to think about the future. What does it mean in practice?
You know, we are sometimes we are afraid to tell some not convenient things. We feel that there can happen something not very well, but we are afraid to tell this. And then we plan for the future. We should do it. So that's like bravery to think about the future and to see opportunities, but also challenges, which are even some big risks which can appear. So that is one. Another one challenge, for example, we planned quite a lot of nice things like resilient country, resilient citizen. But we need it in order to keep our safety and democracy in Lithuania. But at the same time, we want to transform Lithuania. We want to transform, for example, governmental sector, and resilience is a barrier for transformation. So here will be the challenge how to keep a resilient country, but at the same time transform it. Also, there are, you see here that now we have 28 indicators, but we use not only quantitative, but also qualitative indicators, because quantitative indicators not always demonstrate everything. So there will be still things done in development of, as we see here, like Lithuanian long-term social survey. So we plan to do it, and fertility and family survey. So it's we plan to start them in 2024. So those methodologies are developed now, and so we are going to monitor not only quantitative but also qualitative indicators, and that is something new for us.
Qualitative indicators. Our speaker from Denmark has a question or a comment. Let's hear from him.
Yes. So thank you for an interesting presentation. So it's a very large plan. It seems very broad. So how do you, when it's such a big plan, you have to sort of decide how to phase it in. Which areas where should you start? You cannot do everything at the same time. I suppose you have to sort of prioritize and start somewhere and chop it up in smaller pieces. So how do you do that?
Davila, comment, please.
Yes, I can try to. Hello, everyone. I will try to very quickly help you to look at this scheme, which is explaining how we are thinking that the transformation of country and resilience will happen. So we start with five initiatives, 5 strategic initiatives, and you see the premises. It's called premises. So some things have to start happening and be over by 2035, like public governance reform, creation and assertion of total defense system, assurance of social and economic and energy and cybersecurity and resilience. But also as well, we see that that period as a space for experimentation and innovation. So that's also very important. And for that, we in the middle, I'm sorry because it's in Lithuanian, but it's a Lithuanian engine. So that's why. So in the, what will what will ensure that all these things happen? It's transformation in education system. It's an engine, and also deepening of democracy in the country. So it's also broad aims, but it's at the heart of this space for experimentation and innovation. And from there we move to more balanced and sustainable territorial development, development of socially responsible and sustainable economy, and competitive science and innovation system. So that's for the first period of time. That's what's planned, and also in the top you see also that till 2050 we are planning to really work on climate neutral and fostering biodiversity state and demography policy, which is very, very important in Lithuania. So this is what the premises part, and also space for experimentation and innovation. And then we imagine that we will have this period of breakthrough, like, and then and you see first results popping in. So we see that first we can achieve constructive and influential international Lithuania as a constructive and influential international system agent. Later on, we will achieve that we will live as community of future-ready and resilient free people. So it's the further we move, the aims are broader and more abstract. But the first part is really seen, and we see where we should start to ensure that we have this result. So we were focusing mostly on this first period, on this space for experimentation and innovation.
Is that something that the Denmark representative would also like to recommend, starting from, you know, smaller things and then step by step, knowing exactly the plan, what you start with and how you go on?
Yes, I mean, of course, the countries are different, and it's not sort of a one size fits all, but that's very much how we do it. So it's sort of you identify some area. So if it's there's been a big subject, the pension system, when you are allowed to retire, and how you can retire, and so on. So you identify some area, the politicians say this is important, some are saying one thing, some are saying another thing, and then typically what you do is we put together a commission of experts, and they give recommendations to how you can sort of fix problems or optimize the system. And typically, of course, they are given a mandate, so they have to achieve perhaps some goals, and how to do that. So it's a commission with experts, and of course some of the ministers as well. And then they give a recommendation, write a report, give recommendations. The politicians then discuss, and then you make a political agreement in Parliament, hopefully based on some of the recommendations, perhaps with some twists and turns a bit, and then that's how it's implemented. But it's very much one subject at a time.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Since we want practical advice, it's very useful what you're all discussing, these tiny little details that may seem technical, but they are crucial. And I think Daiva, who also presented the very structure of Lithuanian national strategies and how they coincide together, she has a comment as well, so let's allow for that to happen. Daiva, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Julia. I just not more probably a question for Paul. I just want to ask, are you aware of coherence of these different priorities you set each year? They are not yearly, I think. So national security is long-term priority, or you evaluated them, I don't know, separately, because when we're talking in Lithuanian context, why we having national development plan, it means that we look at all priorities, at all our strategic goals in implementation phase, how it, I don't know, how it's structurized to one system. Are we going to our vision or not? And what's happening in yours? Are they separate or are they coherent? And
yes, so I think that the sort of priority between different areas is done in these. It's done yearly in the budget reviews or the budget planning. So that's sort of that all the ministries, they give ideas that what they would like to do, and then it comes in, and of course, as somebody else was already saying, that the amount of money that they requires is above what is there, and then it's up to the government to prioritize how to distribute the money. This is sort of on a yearly basis. But sort of on the long run, then it's this 2030 plan where you sort of make big blocks. So you say, okay, you want to prioritize defense. We use so much money, and then you make a multi-year agreement in Parliament, and then of course the money just follows. So when you do the year-on-year budget, the amount is already fixed. So there you don't have to renegotiate. That is already fixed. So that just leaves less room for other things. So that's sort of how it develops all the time. Hope
Thank you. I think Mara wanted to comment as well, very briefly, since we are coming to an end. And then also, besides Mara, if anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment, please raise your hand now or give us a shout, and then we will hear the questions and then we will try to respond to them. But Mara, for now, the floor is yours.
First of all, thank you for this. Thank you for the courage to do this kind of a route, which is to look at everything. All people need to be participating in dreaming about the future. And that's one thing in our countries which is difficult to get, to people to trust that you can actually dream about the future, to think that you can affect change. That's really important for resilience. So if people have been participating, that's really, really, really important. And then questions, of course, are the harder parts of the next steps, of course, where you have to balance all of these contending things with the resources you have. Then I think it's very interesting to look at, for example, the demographic situation, which is critical for all of our countries, taking that into consideration, the issue that we don't know how to discuss with all of our people about equal development in all of the whole territory of Latvia, when perhaps the only real reasonable answer is the smart shrinkage. We're saying that after a difficult, we finally, I think maybe you did it a long time ago, but we reduced the number of local governments to from about 150 to about 40. And that was very difficult. And we're thinking of efficiency, but we realize that it's a world problem. Even the big cities are emptying out. We're going to be emptying out into Denmark, because the doctors will go there, and all of these issues. So I wish you a lot of luck with this. And thank you very much for doing this. And I hope you share your slides, please, and let us know how you did in Parliament.
Yeah, because didn't you say that Parliament hearing is this afternoon, right? Okay, so good luck with that. Any final comment or any final question, even though Mara has already summarized it in a nice way, dreaming about the future is important, and then everything else follows. All of the obstacles in the way can also be solved by one step at a time. That would be my piece of summary of what has been said. Anyone else? Anything else that we want to mention? If not, then we will just remind ourselves that financing was also emphasized by many speakers as a very important aspect in planning the finances in a way that we don't spend too much. And also monitoring, and as Mara has put it, when you do it and when you have monitored something, you then want to do something about it, not just evaluate for the sake of evaluation, right? Either it is putting something into another strategy or working on the current project. It is very important to do something about the evaluation as well. And that's a very practical advice and something for everybody to remember too. So these are the takeaways from today. Thank you so much, everybody who has joined, everybody who has watched, everybody who has shared their slides. Thank you for everybody for being nearly on time. And let's hope the discussions will continue. We will learn from each other, from the best practices, from the most difficult situations and the obstacles. And yes, good luck with the strategy. I have also noted that one of the speakers, the Lithuanian speaker, said that the follow-up, the what's next or what if bit is not in the strategy yet. So I would see it from general discussions that this is something important in the times where we say that the main keyword to describe those times is uncertainty. So the what if scenarios are really important too. And we will be eager to hear about the what if scenario for the Lithuania 2050 strategy. And it is nice to know that some lessons from the 2030 strategy have been also learned. So thank you, everybody, again. Have a good rest of the day and rest of the day tomorrow, and a good weekend, and continue doing the hard work you're doing. Good luck with everything. See you next time. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Really, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Send the presentations.